Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Michael, I'm Alex.
Hi, Michael.
And yeah, it's good to be here. I just walked in and I was just speaking to someone who was saying to me, yeah, he goes, oh, it's you sharing? He goes, we heard it gets released the day before, who's sharing? And I see it was empty, I was like, they haven't showed up, have they? But then, yeah, do you know, I mean, I was here a few weeks ago and it was packed and it was like the circle, and then on my way here I was thinking at least I don't have to like look straight, look people straight in the eye. Do you know what I mean? But you're right in front of me now. But do you know what? Listen, it's I always say, yeah, for like 20 minutes sitting up here sharing is a small price really, and I always remind myself for that because when I came down and I went through the steps, and after when I got to step 12, my sponsor said to me, stop being a selfish prick and go and help someone and go and carry a message. And I've got friends that I've done treatment with, that I've been on this journey with, and they've been through the steps, but they won't share. But they won't do a top table share, or they won't sponsor people, and all of them have relapsed. So for me, as much as I don't like to come and share, I know I need to be sitting there. And that's how it is. So yeah, I mean, do you know what? Today I've had a good day. I've had a day off today, which is like quite a miracle actually. So I've had a day off today, and it's been really nice. I woke up this morning, and my partner's next to me. My daughter's getting ready for school. She's going to work. My partner, and I just got to lay in bed and even when I'm off work, like on the weekends, I'm always up early. But this morning I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to relax today. I'm just going to chill out. And it's been quite busy. Like, I'm always busy like before Christmas and just after Christmas. It seems like everyone wants their flooring done. And it's so after Christmas I was so busy. But the thing is, over Christmas I had a few weeks off work because I had to have an operation on my nose. I had to have some polyps removed. I thought I said a little operation. And then they said to me, you can't blow your nose for 2 weeks. And I was like, that's all right. I think after about 8 days, I was blowing my nose. And I thought I'd just get it out because obviously it's just going to make the process longer to heal. But yeah, it's a lot more clearer now, So today, I woke up, when I got out of bed, I do what I've always done, I start the day with some gratitude, I do my list, and I do like 3 small achievable goals, and I always try and fulfill them, maybe it's like phone to new people, or like, today it was like, I'm going to go to the sauna, I'm going to go and have a, jacuzzi, I'm going to go and do a 5K run, which is not quite like small, but still it's something that, I do. And I've done all that today, and it's great. And this is the thing, my mum always used to say to me, action speaks louder than words. And I try and do this in my recovery because it's like, this is an action program, as we know. And the amount of times I've always said I'll do something and I never do it. And today, from, the benefits of what, from going through the steps and, and helping others, it's, I'm reliable and I show up and it's great really. But it wasn't always like that. And the thing is, even like when I was like a kid growing up, I was just a naughty kid. I was a naughty boy. I don't know how, like, my school was attached to like a church. My primary was a Catholic school, and they used to let me go out during the day, and I used to be an order server during the day. And then I used to come back to school, and then I used to like, run away from school and go up the West End and shoplift and all that sort of stuff. And I remember my mum, like, we spoke about it recently, like my sister's like a year older than me, and she sent me and my sister to the doctors, to a child psychologist, and that was just from like our behaviours. And so like I was always like, quite disruptive, I hate school. Even my secondary school, my mum used to get my reports, and like there was a few like subject lessons that they couldn't comment on me because they never met me, and it just shows like how much I never really went to school, and I'd rather be out shoplifting or just playing football. That's what I was doing a lot. So my dad, I remember when my dad, he was an alcoholic, and he used to have an Irish band, and he used to play around all the pubs, and I remember like we used to go, like my mum and dad split up, but I still used to go to the pubs and watch him play, and I didn't realise or see what used to go on behind the closed doors. And I remember like my dad, he moved, because I lived in West London and my dad lived in North London, and I remember when he died, and my mum told me, I was 13, and I didn't feel like I wanted to cry, but I felt that's what I had to do. And I was so numb. I was so numb as a kid. And you know, it's, you know, there's been a lot of occasions, like even up to today, where I still feel like numb with certain things. You know, I just already like 2026, I just buried a friend of mine, you know, who died from this illness, and you know, even though it was like sort of an honour to carry his coffin, but it was just like, you know, it was so sad. You know what I mean? It's so sad, and this is like what we're up against. So anyway, yeah, no, I was always like, I was pretty numb, you know, and it's funny because the other day, like, this is what happens now, you know, like when it's with death and all that, it's a different situation, but with you know, like the other day we was watching a film, and this happens quite often now because I'm just a big softie, and I just start crying, and I'm like, where's that come from? And it's just so, I'm trying to sort of express my emotions more these days. But anyway, so like, this is like, we're talking about the progression, you know. So when I was after 13, you know, going on 14, you know, I remember I said like, get on the gas. I said like, go to like have loads of gas. I remember one time we went to like Canberra Sands, and we went to this holiday park, and you know, we bought all the gas out of this little hut. And my mum said to me, I just went to go and get some gas and ain't got fuck all. And I was like, okay. And she goes, I just went to use the iron in the laundry, and someone's ripped it off the wall, and I've just found it on the beach. And I was like, okay. You know, and that's the type of stuff I used to do. But yeah, so the progression, it was like, you know, the gas, and I used to do the gas, and then, you know, and then I started going out raving. I remember I was about 15, right, and I went to a rave, I think it was 1993, and it was like in Coventry, and it was called Anemosa House, and I took this rhubarb and custard, and it was a capsule, and I took this and I remember taking this and I left that club like after midnight, and I was fucked. I was wandering around Coventry, and I said, I'll never do that again. And guess what? You know, I did it again. But I'd done this for a few years with that, and I used to love going out raving. And I remember the first time I took cocaine is when I was in this, I was out all weekend. I remember I was in Brixton at this club, 414, and it was a Sunday, and it was just rotten. Everyone's on the floor, and I remember like I didn't have a lot of money, and the E's were coming down off the E's, and someone had coke, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna buy it with my last £50, and I bought this gram of coke, and I had a line, and I was like, what the fuck's that all about? But you know what? I've done it again. And it's the same thing when someone showed me how to wash it up. I've done it again, you know. Like the alcohol used to scare me because my dad was an alcoholic, and my mum said to me, I never want you to turn out like your dad. So I never really drunk. But I remember when I did drink, I was thinking I was about 15, I was at my auntie's party, and I drunk, you know, I drunk so much, I just blacked out, and then I woke up at my auntie's, and I walked home covering piss and sick, and said I'll never do it again, and I did it again. So when I was going out raving, I used to, this is at the back end of it, it was really playing with my mental health. I used to get so paranoid, you know, and I was smoking puff as well, and I used to really like, you know, I didn't really want to speak to no one. And then, you know, I remember like, you know, I went to a pub and I had a few beers, and all that went away. And that's when the cocaine got introduced, and I started to do the cocaine, and it was just like, all this time as well, you know, all I've been doing is going out committing crime, committing legal activities, whether it's buying, selling, robbing. You know, my mum was always up the youth courts with me, you know, the under 18s, you know. I remember I had such a big ego as a kid as well. I remember I was 17, I thought I got my first car, and it was a bright yellow Renault 5 GT Turbo, like Ali G's car. And I used to drive around countrysides, and I used to break into offices because I was obsessed with laptop computers. And that's what I used to do. So all this time going through the rage scene, this is what I'm doing, is just, you know, I never worked, never done anything, just commit legal activities. And when they put me in the young offenders when I was like 18, it was in Reading when they caught up with me. You know, I went to this young offenders, and like this, I wasn't even on like the hard stuff, like the cocaine and everything didn't come to like about 21. You know, the ecstasy was there already, but you know, so I was doing stuff just for the, you know, the thrill, you know, going into offices, nicking computers, you know, and it was just like, I was just a naughty kid. And I don't feel I even grew up until I came down here. But anyway, do you know, like, I met my daughter's mum in 2010. My daughter, you know, she got pregnant. No, sorry. My daughter was born in 2010, but I met her mum a few years before that. And I remember when my daughter was born, and I went up to the hospital, and I was there, and I was present. I cut the cord, and I was like, right, this is it. I'm going to stop now. I'm going to stop. And I managed to stop. And like in the book, it says you can stop for sufficient reasons, and I feel like that was one of them. And I stopped for about 6 months. And I didn't know about the allergy. I didn't know about this mental obsession. I didn't know that if I had one drink, it's just going to set it off. And that's what happened. I just had one drink. And then I was fucked, and I didn't care about my daughter. Do you know what I mean? I was just going out. The amount of times my daughter's mum let me home, right? And I'll say I'll never do it again. And then a few days later, I'll just be back out, and I was cheating on her. I was lying. And as soon as I was under the influence, before I'd be able to just go out, maybe have a few beers, and have have gear in my pocket, trying to sell it, and I wouldn't do it. And then, and then I had no willpower at all. As soon as I had one pint, that's it. This went on for a few years, and then in the end, we split up. I was living at my mum's. She had enough. She'll kick me out. I'll be, around this bird's house. I'll be around this other bird's house, and they'll kick me out. I'll be borrowing their cars. I'll smash up their car. Do you know what I mean? And it got to a stage where I just had enough. And I remember, I was out for so many days, and I could just feel my body shutting down. And I ran my daughter's mum. I said, "Look, can I come around? I've got nowhere to go." And she let me round. And as soon as I walked in the door, I just collapsed. And then I woke up, and she had to give me CPR. And I went into hospital. And this was in front of my 9-year-old daughter at the time. And so I went into the hospital, and I was in the hospital for like 3 days. And then I came out of the hospital, and this is why I know I had no power, because I just went straight to the pub. And a week later, I got arrested, and then I got put in prison. And that was in 2019. And by the grace of God, I managed to get funding for treatment after doing a detox in Wandsworth Prison. And I remember coming off that detox wing, and like the treatment was in the cards, and there was a woman who's in CA, and a lot of you know her. She used to see me coming in and out of Westminster Court all the time, and she used to say to me, "Michael, look, you need to try and get treatment." And she knew why I couldn't stop drinking. Do you know what I mean? And then she came to the court when I went up for sentencing, and they were going to let me out to do another DRR, but then they managed to get it in the last minute to send me to Bournemouth. And that's where it all began for me, But what I wanted to say before I left that prison, I remember came off the detox wing. I went onto the exercise yard, and I saw my nephew there, and he was 18. And I said to myself, what the hell, where's my life gone? From when I was back in Reading when I was 18, all these years later, I'm seeing my nephew there. I've just come off the detox, horrific detox, live-in detox. And I'm looking at him, and he's just looking at me in disgust, and I'm like, you know what? I need to change. This thing needs to stop. And that's why I had like this surrender. Luckily, I came down to Bournemouth, and I arrived at the treatment centre, and not knowing about anything. And all I know is, that big ego I used to carry around with me. All underneath all that was just a sensitive, insecure boy. Do you know what I mean? And this is what we was trying to work on, to strip that ego and to get vulnerable in treatment. And I was on an order out to stay there for 3 months, and literally after a week being in there, my daughter's godfather, I got a call, and they told me that he's just died, and I was literally just using him before I went to prison. And that was it. I was just like, right, this is it, I've got to stay here. Do you know, if I left, I would have went back to prison anyway. So I stayed there, and I ended up staying in that treatment centre for like nearly 6 months. And I left there, I graduated, I came out, and then I was out for a few months, and then lockdown happened, and it was just nuts, because it was like, everyone's like starting these meetings up, people are getting clean on Zoom, and it was just like something that, no one was used to really, but we just all stuck together, all that traditional one stuff. Do you know what I mean? Everyone just got together, started meetings, and we got through it. And like I said, I met my sponsor in that treatment centre. I started going through the steps, got to step 4, and in the treatment centre, the counsellor was trying to get all this shit out of me, like really about when I was a kid, all this stuff. I was like, I ain't telling you nothing. And then it was only when I got the sponsor, and I was told, you need to be fearless and thorough, that when I read out my step 4 to him, and I'd done my step 5, and I left that house, I knew something was working. Do you know what I mean? Because I felt lighter. I said to myself, do you know what? I felt a bit freer. And that's what made me continue, just to sort of like, start going through the rest of the steps and start looking at myself, which I never used to do. Got 5 minutes, yeah, cool. So, since I got introduced to them steps at that treatment centre, I haven't had to drink or use since then. It's been quite challenging at times, especially last year. Like in May, I was at work and I had a phone call from my older sister, and she said, because our younger sister went to Turkey with her 2 kids, that she just had a heart attack, and they think she's dead. And I was like, okay, and I'll never be able to do this. I had a passport, which was, amazing as itself. Do you know what I mean? So we just went straight. We just got the next flight that evening, went to Turkey, and the thing is, it was just like her boy and her daughter was out there. I've always been, I've always done enough for my recovery, and that's why I felt a bit safe, But when I was out there, I've never been so scared in my life, seeing my sister on the life support machine, and her 2 sons, because her older son flew out there. He was on a tag actually, and they let him fly out there. And the 2 sons are fighting outside this hospital in Turkey, and it was just the worst thing ever when their mum's dying. And see, people handle situations in different ways, and that's how I used to do. When my dad was died, when they told me my dad died, and that's how I used to handle it, and that's how he was handling it. And it was just nuts, because it was like I was there in the hospital, and then it stopped, and then she was all right. We should get her home. But during that time in that hospital, and it's just mad, what a coincidence. I was sitting downstairs, I was just like writing my stuff. Do you know what I mean? And I see someone from Bournemouth come in. I see someone from Bournemouth who a lot of you know, and he came from Bournemouth, and he was in that hospital, and I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, and it was just one of the moments, you know what I mean, that I'm not alone, and I don't need to sort of act out or do anything anyway. So that was one of the toughest times in my recovery, to be honest with you. But I got back and I got home safe, and she got home safe, and that was the most important thing, that I could be there for my sister. The woman I was talking about, my daughter's mum, since I came down here, it took like 3-4 years for her to see that I've changed. I'm not that person anymore. And we actually got back together, and she moved down here with my daughter, and my daughter's going to be 16 next month, and she's been down here for 3 years. And that sort of stuff is just like, is what I do here today. Do you know what I mean? I've always had a sponsor, I've always had a home group, I've always had a commitment. There's always, I'm still learning this, especially like, when they first moved down, I thought, yeah, I'm all right, I can just sort of like, I didn't realise that I'm putting my family first. I thought it was all right, it's my family, they come. But after a little while, I knew I was getting a bit, getting resentful. Like, started shouting at the dog for no reason, do you know what I mean? And that's when I know my spirit needs to be, up there. And that's the beauty of it, the fact that I can realise today, when I need to do more work, and as long as I'm not thinking about myself a lot of the time, I'm half all right. Do you know what I mean? And I am today. I try and help people. I'm naturally selfish, but from doing this program, I could be more selfless. And it's so much has happened since I've been down in Bournemouth. Bournemouth's my home now. I used to share a lot about, I'm from London. But fuck London, mate. I'm a Bournemouth boy now, do you know what I mean? And I'm happy to be a Bournemouth boy. So, but if you're new, this is what I did to stay sober, and what I still do today. I'm not going to start telling people, do this, do that, do that, do you know what I mean? But it's possible, and I don't have to wake up with that awful obsession no more. And that's a miracle. I'll leave it there.